So it's about proximity. It's about keeping a reactionary gap. If it's looking for threat cues, like learning the physical skills, even in what we do, the physical skills should be the last resort. We should be teaching situational awareness, good communication skills, de-escalation skills. That's all part of karate.
Arigashimasu! Welcome back to the Goju Ryu Karate Center. I am so happy to have as my esteemed guest, Sensei Paul Broomhall. He is based in Australia, in Queensland, a man with incredible credentials. I'd like to list them for you before we get into the many questions, because you know me, I'm a queen for questions. Training for around 40 years. You started when you were 12, right, Sensei?
Yes, that's correct.
Excellent. Police officer for 27 years, which, as we know in the karate world, is the historical kind of lineage. We know that Sensei Miyazato was also in the police force, and working with the Queensland youth regarding bullying and behavior issues with more than 1,800 kids. And plus you have your own dojo, obviously, help me with my South African pronunciation. Is it Cairns or Cairns?
Cairns, that's it. Yeah.
Oh, I was right the first time. Yeehaw, well done me. So, Sensei, I've been seeing your work on Facebook. I know Facebook is your main modus operandi. I personally avoid Facebook like the plague. But thank you for watching our work online and agreeing to chat to me. But a lowly third, Dan. I've only been training 20 years, so I have so much to learn from you and your thoughts on this world we share of traditional, well, let's put it this way, practical Okinawan, Goju Ryu, and affiliated styles. Speaking about practicality and circling to your experience in the police force, you can't ask for better experience and exposure, and as a testing ground. Wilder and Kane, who wrote The Way of Kata, they did a lot of security work as well as part of their training, and it was a great way to test efficacy. Now, if anyone can attest to the efficacy of karate, it's you. So could you tell us some of the times where you found your karate very practical in your application in police work?
I would actually just temper that a little bit. You can actually do police work and do karate and actually have no real idea how it applies.
Okay.
It comes back to we can keep making the same mistakes over and over again. Very young in my policing career, I was doing a Japanese sporting version of karate. I was not doing the practical Goju Ryu, and I found that it was failing me what I needed to do, because I was a testament to my training. I would, in difficult circumstances, I'd throw a couple of quick techniques and then pause. So what was I waiting for? I was waiting for a referee to intervene and award me an ippon. This is the thing. Under real duress, we revert back to the skills we've done a lot of. And if we're doing a lot of sport, we're actually ingraining in our subconscious a skill set that could potentially set us up for failure. The other thing too is not everyone's good at analyzing what's going on. I was training karate, but luckily I was in a position where I was actually in an instructor role in the police, where we had to very, very strictly stick to a curriculum that was authorized by the police. But the funny thing was we were just responding to things in a haphazard manner as far as our training. So what I did, because of my position, is I went, well, surely we should be looking at some statistics and research. Like, why are we teaching to police this particular technique when statistically they're not being confronted with that sort of aggression? And in my position of being an instructor, I was really, really lucky to be exposed to some world-leading training that sadly within Queensland has dropped away in the past 10 years, where I was shown that my previous training in the police had really set me up for failure. So practices, for example, in a firearms range, shooting pieces of paper, you can get really good at, but those skills deteriorate when the pieces of paper trying to put holes in you. So it was a complete change in mindset. And I applied that to the way I thought about karate. And all of a sudden, all of these practical notions started to come out. And I realized that there was so much practical goodness already there that we were overlooking. So it started with identify what the risk is. What's the highest risk that you're going to be confronted with? And how does your karate respond to that? So from a sporting point of view, I was trained to throw really quick punches, move in, move out, not really helpful in effecting an arrest. Punching people, very easily seen as excessive use of force. moving on to Goju Ryu, all of a sudden, there's all these movements in kata that make no sense as blocks and strikes. As soon as you go hands-on with someone, there's grappling, there's throwing, there's joint locking, and all of that starts to make sense where you look at, and everyone's aware of the term habitual acts of violence.
Yes.
So I was doing the same sort of thing in the police where I looked at what's the most common method of assault in the area where I was working. And this is a bit disgusting, but this is humanity.
No, tell me.
People spitting on police was people spitting on police was the number one method of assault. Number two was a swinging punch to the head, which is, it's exactly the same as male on male violence. It's right up there in the habitual act.
I always tell my students that's because what people see in the movies is a hook. It's one of the most common things we need to attack against, defend against, as a bunkai, as a kata application, is a hook. And it's even in the Bubishi. I think one of the 36 diagrams is defending against a hook. There's only so many ways to hit someone. There's only so many ways to be hit. So when you codify those defenses, that's the difference. And I think that's a lot of what you were teaching in the police forces, actually codifying those defenses and making them muscle memory. That's why the first thing we teach is literally a face block. And you will do it 2 million times.
Yeah, the funny thing is there's actually another school of thought. This is what I love about Goju, okay? I love the term. Everyone knows that it means hard, soft. I go a little bit further. I think Choji Miyagi chose it because it was about opposites. So sometimes the complete opposite is true, okay? Someone's good, moves with a straight technique, you move with a round technique. Someone's good at striking, you grapple them. Someone's good at grappling, you strike them. So I think, yes, you can develop muscle memory over years, but there's also a way to do a skill once and remember it forever. I know that sounds strange, but you think about how the mind works and how the human body reacts both physiologically and psychologically to survival stress. We have trauma. We have things that stick in our brain forever. So if we are clever about the way we train, we can cut those years and years and years of repetition down to a very short period to get those people to understand what we want. An example of this is under duress, when you have a genuine adrenaline dump and it's a life-endangering situation and someone's about to attack you, we all do predictable things. We all turn and face what the threat is. We look straight at it because we've got binocular vision. Our eyes aren't on the side of our head. We lower our center of gravity and we raise our hands. So if you think about pretty much every kata that we do, we do a yoi position, gekasai, soyunshin, you're lowering center of gravity and in some way your hands are covering your face. So you can actually put a person under a bit of duress, instill a bit of emotion and really pressure them. And rather than look at the specific technique, say the kata oyo is face the threat, lower your center of gravity, raise your hands. In other words, put something between you and the strike, and then your training will kick in after that. You will grapple, you will move into a technique, but that initial response does not need thousands of repetition.
I think one of the difficulties we face is, so we teach from 5 years old to 68-year-olds. And there's some groups that could take a lot of pressure testing. And there are some groups, women have to go to work the next day. We can't necessarily have them going to work with blue eyes. But how do we pressure test safely? And I think that's one of the things that a lot of dojos are struggling. And also at different levels of different countries. So I've been to Australia, one of the most beautiful countries, although, gratefully I did not see any of the snakes or spiders or any of the other killer creatures. But it strikes me as a very safe place.
They saw you.
They definitely saw me. I mean, I'm sure there was a huntsman spider who was blogging my movement somewhere. Where was I going with this? So as a police officer, you still would have encountered violence and dealing with people who are under the influence, I think does also change how we respond in our self-defense. I actually need to get a South African policeman on at some point. But tell me about the spitting defense. It didn't even occur to me, but
I was in general duties for 10 years. You're doing rotational shift. You just rock up and whatever happens, happens. So it's about proximity. It's about keeping a reactionary gap. If it's looking for threat cues, like learning to, like the physical skills, even in what we do, the physical skills should be the last resort. We should be teaching situational awareness, good communication skills, de-escalation skills. That's all part of karate. But if someone's, going to spit, it's important for starters to Talk like you've got an Italian heritage. Talk with your hands up, because hands in front of your face are one of your best friends. When you go to grapple with someone, it's not a competition like BJJ. You're effecting an arrest, and someone is, you're right, affected by drugs or alcohol or mental illness, or they're just motivated not to be arrested. You have to be able to position your body in such a way that they can't actually look you in the eye. Now, that's not a consideration if I'm playing sport. And in this day and age, think about the diseases you can get, the illnesses you can get.
Yeah,
You could be dealing with someone being in a fight, and they're not just spitting saliva. It could be blood coming your way.
absolutely. I want to cycle back. Tell everyone about threat cues. What are they? How do we identify them? And how can we incorporate that knowledge into our training?
Threat cues. So it all comes back to body language. I had a mentor in the police, an incredible gentleman called Bill Turner, who he retired at the rank of inspector, an incredible judoka, wrestler, all that, amazing human being. He taught something that he called tactical communication. And he taught us that 90% of communication is nonverbal. So the words that come out of our mouth is not necessarily what we're taking in. So you're looking at someone. If you see, so I'm Caucasian, if you see my skin go really pale, like instantly pale, I've just had an adrenaline dump. The blood's being diverted from the skin's surface. It's going to the major organs and major muscles. So I'm going to fight or I'm going to run. You can look at people's pupils. The pupils dilate too when things are about to go south. Another thing that we all do without even thinking about is something called head tilt. Just before we're about to throw a punch or something like that in a real situation, not in the dojo, not in sport, is we tilt our head slightly. Okay. So we get that head tilt happening. You listen to people's breathing. You listen to their speaking. If the way they're speaking, they change, they speed up a bit, or they slow down a bit, or they go quiet. All of these clusters of body language signals send a very clear message that someone is about to either run or they're about to fight. And we ignore those at our peril.
That would explain why, I mean, if you're drunk and someone else is drunk and you're not picking up on their threat cues because you're just not compos mentis. One of the best lines that I got out of the Ultimate Self-Defense Championship was from one of the competitors. Don't go stupid places or stupid people at stupid times. When we think about self-defense, everyone thinks, home invasions or muggings, but how much of it actually happens in places like bars and clubs, where now we've also got the extra Molotov cocktail of alcohol and drugs being thrown in, and how that might alter our understanding of threat cues. And like you say, it is non-verbal. So much of body communication is non-verbal, and learning to read that, I think, is a very, very important skill. And there might be better ways we can test that and learn it.
Yeah. Conversely, too, it's how we present ourselves in these situations. One of the things we work on in our dojo is blading the body to make a smaller target. Makes perfect sense in a dojo. But when someone's deciding whether you're a potential victim or to leave you alone, blading your body is actually making you send a smaller body language signal to say that I'm actually shrinking a little bit, that I'm not 100% sure. Whereas if you just remain square and confident and talk with your hands, coincidentally looks very, very similar to an exercise we do a lot of, your body language signal is, I'm not a victim. I'm not being aggressive towards you, but I'm giving you an opportunity to back up. The other sad thing about the modern world is that the reality is it's not going to be some drunken fool or a stranger who hurts us. Statistically, it's far more likely it's going to be somebody we know, someone in our family, or someone in our circle of people we already know. So we've got to get away from romanticizing that we're down a dark alley and that's where it happens. That's not necessarily statistically where it's most likely to happen.
You're 100% right. In fact, when we look at, because of the safeguarding courses we do and my own research and my own interest areas, particularly as being a woman martial artist, the disproportionate victims of violence are women and children. Always have been, and hopefully it'll change, but it's not changing soon. There's a group called Men and Women Against Child Abuse. They were doing an interview on the radio the other day, and the guy who runs it says when he has to go to testify in court for child abuse, 99% of the time, it's the mother, father, step-parent, aunt, uncle, grandparent. It's very rarely some random stranger. It could be a school teacher, could be the gym teacher, could be athletics coach, and even, unfortunately, in our own field, we see it happening. It brings all of us down, and that's why it's up to us to speak up when there is suspicion and there is safeguarding that needs to be done or reporting that needs to be done. Very much so. I think there's a machismo around I will be the best in a bar fight or I'll survive the zombie apocalypse. Everyone's got that main character syndrome. But a lot of my work is teaching kids to stand up for themselves at school and how to report if it's someone they know, which kids don't know. They don't know that if they tell an adult. I don't know about Australian law, but I assume it's similar. If a child reports abuse to you, you are obligated by law to report that. And you are protected as a reporter as long as you are reporting in good faith. But you're right. I mean, what you've seen in the police, you've probably also seen how much domestic violence takes place. And again, underreported. So often not reported. Rape not reported, especially when it's within the family, especially with incest. And I think that's the thing that we don't like to teach. We don't want to teach, but that's maybe more important about what we teach as instructors.
Yeah. No, that's right. Look, if we don't teach people, how do we expect them to be able to navigate, the world? I currently work with young people and I do sessions on conflict avoidance and resilience. And even when I'm talking with the children and the parents outside of the dojo, one of the questions I simply ask is, do you know what starts a fight? The problem is a lot of us have an idea what we think starts a fight, but if we don't actually know, how are we going to avoid it? So I just come back to essentially what starts a fight is our reaction. That's simply it. Someone says something awful to me, I can choose whether I'm in that fight. Even if someone throws a punch at me, I choose whether I'm in that fight. I can step back and ring the authorities. Fighting and self-defense, two completely different things. Self-defense is when you have that option to get away, that option to call for help is taken away from you. And this is what we look at when we're trying to encourage kids away from a life of violence and crime. They've got to know they've got to learn what actually starts the fight, because how are they going to improve themselves if they don't know, if their parents don't know?
That's actually a fantastic point. And I think one that's well worth sharing with everyone is, and seeing the cues, fusing those cues before they even start. Obviously, there's varying levels of violence and bullying. I actually quite prefer it when the kids tell me there's a physical bully they have at school. I'm like, that's very straightforward compared to the cyberbullying we're seeing, which is getting you. Luckily, your country just passed that social media law. And I know there's talk about doing the same here. Bullying is not a new thing. I just think it has accelerated, and the violence, the granular violence which these kids do. They're making deepfake porn of each other. They're making filters of overweight kids with pig filters. Like, there are so many more tools now to the bully. So I actually prefer when the kids like, this kid shoved me at school. I'm like, okay, this is straightforward. We can deal with this. What is your advice to young people and kids today when they're dealing with these multiple facets of bullying?
Well, to start off with, the ban here in Australia has kicked off. It's a great step in the right direction because children aren't mature enough to deal with bullying 24 hours a day and in their safe place, in their home. It's getting into their home. The issue is, however, that it's not been 100% effectual in that there are so many children who still have all the social media platforms. So the technical difficulty of removing kids underage from that is still posing a huge problem. It comes back to the same thing about what starts a fight. It's my reaction that starts a fight. So I'm in charge of my behavior. So the same thing when it comes to bullying. We cannot change the way people think about us. We can't change what people say about us. We can't force people to, as an individual, I can't force someone to act a certain way. What I can do is change how I act. So when it comes to kids, I like to use the analogy, a bully is like a plant, okay? Your plant needs two things to survive. Really, it needs sunlight and it needs water. If you deprive that plant of sunlight and water, it will eventually die. It'll eventually go away. A bully is much the same. You deprive that person of your attention and you deprive that person of any sort of reaction to show that you're upset, angry, or anything. I know that's really, really hard to do, but that gives you a lot of power over the bully. We simply don't give them our attention. We don't react to them, and eventually they will stop doing what they're doing or they will move away. Like, especially for children, that's really super important because they have the power within themselves. We have to build their self-esteem.
Again, self-esteem is at the root of all the bullying problems. Both the bully themselves, everyone thinks bullies have high self-esteem. They don't. If they did, they wouldn't need to impose themselves on other people to prove their worth as human beings. And then obviously the kid who's being bullied has their self-esteem degraded over time. And especially if they feel like they can't speak up and they can't tell anyone that this is even happening. Because it must be my fault. I deserve to be bullied. I don't want to get in more trouble than I'm already in. So having those conversations, and again, so much of what we do has got nothing to do with kicking and punching as instructors. It's part of what we do, but I think people forget that a large part of being in the dojo is teaching that environment with the structures for respect, self-respect, respect for others, and how to stand up for your own boundaries. Someone's like, Ki is so stupid. Why do you teach Ki? I'm like, because Ki gives kids back their voice. Why do you think if just the ability to raise your voice in defense is a skill? It's particularly important, I find, for little girls, because little girls are often told that you must be quiet and nice girls don't shout and nice girls don't argue. And so when I give them permission to make noise in someone's face in the state of leave me alone, and that very clear delineation of boundaries, Ki is not stupid. It's got a purpose. It's only stupid when you're doing a tournament and it becomes like a Tarzan yell for 2 hours a day. This is why I'm so happy to talk to you, because bullying has become such, I know it's the number one reason people are bringing kids to our dojo. 10, 15 years ago when I first started teaching, it's tie with my child has ADHD and they need help or they need discipline and they're being bullied at school. Those are the two main reasons we're getting kids in the dojo or brought to the dojo. But relating back to the bullying thing, it's now becoming such a mandate for us. But those lessons we teach for bullying are actually general life lessons as well, just for your confidence. You might never be bullied in your life, but it doesn't hurt to have confidence.
The thing that I tell kids too is like school is where kids learn to navigate life. They're going to school and they're encountering bullies. But the thing is, we can be bullied at any stage during our life. You don't necessarily have to like a person in your classroom. You don't necessarily have to like a person in your workplace. But you've got to navigate and learn how to respect their right for being who they are and what they're doing. And that's what once again, we just need to take a bit of ownership as adults, and we need to teach kids. And the other thing is too, we need to lead by example. Like, the kids watch us. So when I get to do some exercises with young people who have problems with resilience and things, and have a tendency to fight first and ask questions later, I love to use karate in a way where I get the kids to walk up and kick me between the legs as hard as they can. I get the biggest kid in the class, and sometimes these kids are like 2 or 3 times my size. We've got some big kids, and they'll punch me in the stomach as hard as they can. I will stand in front of them and smile and go, "That's a great hit, well done." I'm not doing anything special, so anyone who does Goju Ryu can do that sort of. But what I'm saying to the kids is, look, just because you have struck me, I'm still in charge of my demeanor. I can choose how I respond. You have that power as well. And if we're not teaching kids that, if we're not teaching, like you said, excellent, get the girls to have a voice, get them to ki, get them to speak up. We have that rule in the dojo, the same thing as your mum and dad are telling you to be quiet. We're telling you the exact opposite. If you're not yelling and telling us, telling someone to keep away from you in the dojo, we're going to end up getting push-ups as a penalty.
I love a push-up penalty.
You're talking about pressure testing. So as a police trainer, I was able to develop training packages. And I think we, as karateka, we need to get smarter about this thing. Well, whenever anyone says pressure testing, they automatically think it's got to be heavy contact and it's blood and guts and, rendering people unconscious and it's filled with risk. No, there's actually plenty of different ways to pressure test and test that your skills will apply. We've just got to be clever about it. It doesn't, like, you can actually have, the older person in the dojo pressure test their skills and not worry about the risk of injury. And that doesn't take away the reality of them being able to apply those skills. Bit hard for me to explain, but sometimes going as hard as you can is actually it's actually reinforcing the wrong idea, and it's just setting you up for failure in certain circumstances. So we can be clever about pressure testing. So one thing that you can do is, so you've seen the bogu that judo people wear. We've been using them for a long time. You just put a bogu on someone. It's claustrophobic. People don't like wearing them. It creates tunnel vision. It creates auditory exclusion, all of which you would experience in a real situation. And as an instructor, you can slap the bogu with an open hand, not too hard, and the pressure and the feeling and the sound reverberating can mimic an actual punch safely enough that you can pressure test. So it's just a matter of, okay, we're going to look at a student's response, put a bogu on, I want you to face that way. Someone will stand in front of them and ask them to answer a question. As they're trying to answer a question, someone comes in from behind and slaps. We then pressure test their ability to lower their center of gravity, raise their hands, wrap up the person, and then execute a kata oyo, such as change the relationship with the attacker, place the attacker on the ground and extricate themselves. Or if, say, one of the students was actually a police officer, they might wrap up the person, change the relationship, take them to ground and restrain them in a way that maintains their respiration and doesn't reduce the risk of sudden in custody death syndrome.
That's brilliant. It also reminds me of a drill. I didn't even realize this was a form of Shay's pressure testing. He makes the students hold, and we actually have a lead baseball bat in the dojo for the lolsies, apparently, or even a Joe, and they put their forehead on it and then they spin around. And then after like 20 seconds, they let go, and then they have to try and orientate themselves with someone gently attacking them, because now we've got someone whose vision's all over the place. It's a great way, like if you're in a fight and your head gets hit, can you deal with sudden change in vision and balance? If someone does hit you hard enough on the ear, your balance is going to change. And that's one way to simulate it without actually having to, get 12-year-olds drunk. This is a great idea.
Other ways to pressure test, if you're doing the karate that doesn't have a tactile component like kake, shape up against someone and turn the lights out and see how your karate works.
So these are definitely all the ways that we can look at pressure testing our martial arts. And then in between that, also having times where we just enjoy the art for the art, which we're allowed to do.
Yes.
I think a lot of people think, well, if you're not doing UFC training all the time, your karate is useless, which truly bothers me, because we are allowed to just like doing karate because we like karate. And I think taking that away from people who just want to do karate because it's cool, and it is cool. I don't care what the other styles have to say about it. Okay. I love karate. I think it's cool. I know it's not as cool as UFC or whatever, but you're allowed to just enjoy it and have the benefits of pressure testing and all of that. And when you have students who are quite frail or have heart problems, then of course you adjust, you scale up or down. Or maybe this exercise is just not for them today. And that's super fun.
Yeah, but what you spoke about, Sensei, is absolutely spot on. And I just had a recent conversation with a couple of karateka in South Africa that you may know, a gentleman called Dwayne and Miguel.
Yes.
So
friends of the dojo and the channel.
Yes, fantastic supporters of everything we do here, and I'm supporting them. They're doing some great stuff. But my question to them was, we're all part of the push to bring pragmatism back to karate. Why just doing Krav Maga or the spear system or ISR matrix, all those self-defense things? My response to that is, I actually really enjoy the fact that I'm learning a different culture. I get to learn different words, whether it be Noguchi or Japanese. I like the fact that karate has a soul. I really enjoy the fact that there is a moral code. So not so much, we're not karate do, but I think it comes out of the karate jutsu. And I think that gives what we do a different dimension that can take us through our whole life, rather than just purely worrying about being attacked by someone with a balaclava on.
Beautiful. I think that's the exact way we should. But karate has soul. I think my distaste for a lot of the like practicals. First of all, they're not styles. They're like hobbies, because they don't encourage you to be a better person. There's no, like you say, there's no moral code. I think in Wilder's book about teaching, he says it is the etiquette that separates us from base violence. Anyone can punch. But if we are raising better human beings and creating a place where people feel safe and included and welcome and doing a beautiful art with history. And again, like I love visiting Okinawa. I went once and I haven't stopped thinking about it. All I want to do is go back to Okinawa. I watch other people's Okinawa blogs. Hi, Sensei Tuari. to see Okinawa. And I mean, I'm so jealous of Hanshi McCarthy getting to live there. It's such a beautiful place, and and when you know your Okinawan history and you understand that as a country and as a people who've experienced such incredible violence against them, they've been colonized, they've been bombed, and yet they choose peace. You will never meet a nicer, more humble, more warm culture than when you go to Okinawa. When you visit the dojos there, there's a table in the dojo where people have coffee after training, and it's part of like, not in the cheesy, like, Fast and Furious family thing, everybody's family.
Mm.
A dojo is where you belong. It's where you feel like people meet their spouses and people make we've got a group in the dojo we call the Ninja Turtles, and watching them be friends and seeing them share their outings on WhatsApp status brings me so much joy that they love being in the dojo, because it's not just about hitting things. And I think that's my problem with the Krav Maga and these like purely practical styles, is they've got no soul and they've got no warmth. It's very much like a transactional thing. You pay your money, you learn your skill, and you go home. But being a sensei is a very, very, it's a lot like being a lighthouse. Everyone comes and goes like ships, and some people, the ships will come past and some will stay with you for a while, and some will only be with you for a short period of time, but they will hopefully, if you do your job right, they remember what you said, that you can have an impact on people's lives decades after they saw you. Is that not a beautiful and important thing to treasure, instead of us chasing like legitimacy from other styles? This begging for approval from other styles has got to stop.
Yeah, I think, and the other thing too is, once again, I love Goju. We can have both. We can have the reality-based, pressure-tested, validated throughout the years Budo, and then we can have the character building, the life enhancing, the ikigai of our karate. And I think Goju epitomizes that. Look, it doesn't matter what style, like whatever style you do, you can get that in karate, which is I think is incredible. And I 100% agree. Like, I mean, Okinawa I too have been once, and it affects you. Like, just to see how open and friendly and warm people are. A real incredible thing is going to happen here in Cairns this year. Cairns is essentially halfway between Okinawa and New Zealand. So karate is huge in New Zealand. Karate is obviously huge in Okinawa. We are so lucky that we have got a whole stack of sensei coming from Okinawa to Cairns to run a 2-day seminar.
Amazing.
And we've got people coming up from New Zealand, including Tuari sensei. If you wanted to look more into it, it's Kazuna being run by James Pankovic of the Asato Dojo. And people from all around Australia are coming. And we get to experience that friendship, that camaraderie, that openness, that willingness to share right on our doorstep.
Beautiful. I'm so jealous. We're so far from Okinawa. We are at minimum we're like 16 to 24 hours travel to Okinawa. So for us to go, it's a very big deal. I wish we don't even have a gashku culture, sadly, in South Africa. I think there's a lot of insecurity where no one invites anyone to gashkus. Whereas I look at like Les Bubka sensei, for example, he's touring all over the place.
Yeah.
Panethi sensei, everyone's just like visiting everyone's dojos and having a good time. And we just don't have that culture here. Someone was saying, why doesn't Shay do gashkus and stuff? Like, because no one's interested here. It's very insular. There's a lot of insecurity. Like, what if they're so good, they steal my students? That's the other reason why people don't like to have guest instructors. We have guest instructors. We invite friends from Shotokan. We invite friends from different styles because we believe that we are richer when we share our knowledge. Shay was offered an opportunity to take over a dojo in New Zealand at the time, to have his own dojo there, because they saw what he was doing. He was in New Zealand for the World Goju Karate Federation. He used to be the national coach for the team, and he loved New Zealand. He was telling me what a beautiful place it is, and also very warm, very welcoming people. And we've got contacts there. I don't know if you know Sensei Penny Chekatry. She's also from South Africa, and she's set up she's amazing.
We're a bit strange. So we live in Cairns, which is North Queensland. Just to give you an idea of the distance.
Yeah,
so
we're
in the state of Queensland. It's on the pointy bit. Yes. So it's on the corner, and we're up right at the top. So Brisbane is our capital city. Our capital city is actually closer to Adelaide, which is on the southern part of the Australian continent. So It's like the distances are ridiculous. So as far as
No,
we
Australia's huge.
have been very isolated for a long, long time, we haven't had access to high level sensei. So we've had to basically learn in isolation for a long, long time. It wasn't until 2016 that we actually traveled to Okinawa.
Okay.
And after that, Tuari Sensei started to look at what we were sharing, and he reached out to us and said, "You're right up there. You need to come and share." And that's when we went to New Zealand for the first time, and I got to do the one of the instructors involved in the Goju guys in Wellington, and that's where I met Penny Sensei. And
Yes.
I'm happy to say that we're absolutely family now. But
Wonderful.
our club is absolutely tiny. And you're talking about that issue of karate in South Africa. It's no different here. Kansas got, I think it's about probably about 14 different karate schools. I've trained at most of them in the idea of openness and friendliness, and it just hasn't been reciprocated. There's no sharing going on.
That's a shame.
Anyway, it is what it is. Everyone has a different idea of what their karate is there to do. They love their flavor of karate. That's fantastic. But we should be able to appreciate what someone else does. And it's not about competition. It's about collaboration. And you mentioned
Very
Les
much so.
Bubka. Les does a fantastic job, but we should be sharing a lot more. Look, if we can't share with someone who lives down the road here, that's fine. We'll share with the globe. So I know we use Facebook. I'm a boomer. My kids tell me I'm a boomer. We just share what we do in the dojo, warts and all. If you don't like it, move on. If you find it inspirational, fantastic.
One of my favorite jokes is, how many karateka does it take to change a light bulb? 6. 1 to do it, and 5 to stand there saying that's nice, but that's not how we do it in my dojo. And I think that pretty much sums up how we are. My second favorite karate joke is, what's the difference between God and a karate instructor? God doesn't think he's a karate instructor. So we deal with a lot of ego in our field, unfortunately, in what we do. But I think, karate politics, unfortunately, has an outsized role when 90% of the karate people I meet are actually wonderful people who I love talking to. We're all forming these relationships across the world. Our dojo and yours, Invisible Sensei Max Bedo in the UK, Les Bubka, Sensei Terry Sanders in the States. What a privilege. We couldn't do this 20 years ago. You just kind of had to take what your sensei said as the word of God, because you didn't have the internet. You had all these, my husband still has them, all those old black belt magazines from back in the day, because that was the internet,
Yeah.
that was Karate Google, long time ago.
Yeah.
And it always brings me to this question, and I'd love your input. Is karate, I know we talked about briefly over email, is karate now in its golden age, where we have so many instructors and such a diversity of voices? Or do you think that we are, because of the spread of karate and maybe the watering down and maybe the tournament influence, do you think maybe the golden age of karate is behind us?
I actually think it's definitely in front of us. It really is.
I like this answer.
Yeah, we've got, like you said, this would never have happened. We can share, we can exchange. Like, myself and my friends at the dojo routinely do training with people wherever. They're training with Tuari in New Zealand over the internet. Yes, you're not going hands on, but you're exchanging ideas. And when you do meet, you can put those ideas into practice. I've got friends now, who've reached out to me in the Netherlands. I've done classes. I've done a class for someone who's in Japan. I've exchanged with sensei in Great Britain who've done sessions for us. Like, we could never do that. So we're actually on the cusp of something great. I think it was Choja Miyagi who said that we really need to open up karate to other martial arts so that we can receive some feedback and criticism. But the more we
Absolutely.
exchange, the more we share, we're actually following his words.
Seek not what the masters did, but seek what they sought, which is always great advice. I have a pet theory, and maybe you'll indulge me. I brought this up in my podcast with Sensei Noah Legal, that we are now in like a third wave of karate. Shay says it's the fifth wave. My argument is the first wave is the birth of karate as we understand it today, 1930s to 1950s. The second wave is karate leaving Okinawa. Now it's going, especially to the massive outsized influence of America on karate. But also now it's in South Africa. We had the Japanese instructors and Okinawan instructors coming here because it was so cheap. The rand was so strong that they could afford to bring out Sensei Higawan and Sensei Chinen for a month or two at a time to train with these great instructors. Then comes now what I call the third wave, Now we're in like another generation of instructors, more women, more instructors of color, more gaijin instructors. Now it's not just the only Okinawan or
Yes.
only Japanese voices, but now we've got all these people who've had time to grow up in karate and become world experts. Your generation, yourself, Sensei Tuari, my husband, people in their 50s and 60s who are now becoming the big names and now the taking over the mantle from your instructors. And my generation coming up now behind you and bringing our strengths to the field, which may be, you call yourself a boomer, you're not, you're Gen X, but you've adapted to technology faster. And I think that's the other thing, and why there's a little bit of friction, is that some older generations might feel very threatened that we're coming to take their place. We're not. We just want to add to what we love. We stand on the shoulders of giants. Sensei Penny Chekatry is one of the giants on whose shoulders I stand. She was my sensei. Without her creating Sensei Mary, who created me, I wouldn't be here. And we need, and she and Sensei Wendy and JKA and Sensei Karen, Sensei Lillian, who was a black belt before I was born in OGKK. She's an 8th dan. They've carved steps up for me and the girls behind me to walk. And I think we are the next wave, and how that will change and influence karate remains to be seen. We won't know until it's over, really, the differences we've made. That's my pep theory.
Yeah. Rest assured, Sensei, you are absolutely part of that movement. We love sharing what you do. There's a lot of our Udancha who really enjoy what Shay and yourself get up to, and it's really, really inspiring to see a very strong and passionate woman out there spruiking the benefits of the art that we love. Yeah, keep it up. Absolutely keep it up. And I know Penny would be smiling because she knows that she had a part to play in that.
Well, she sent me a Facebook message saying, keep what you're doing. I'm so inspired. I'm like, ma'am, with all due respect, like, I'm just a baby here. You're the one who I look up to. You're one of the women that made it possible for me to come from where I'm coming from. Thank you for the very kind words. I'm sure you know part of ADHD is rejection dysphoria, but we also get praise euphoria. I can live on kind words for a month. I don't even need food. But and that leads me to one of the other things, maybe like a less like hectic or heavy part. I think ADHD is disproportionately overrepresented amazing English with your 2 degrees, overrepresented with karate instructors. Shane knew he had ADHD as a kid, and he was kind of got his diagnosis early, and he's learned to work with it as a superpower. I only got my diagnosis at 38, as so many women do. All the energy that women spend masking ADHD, when you have kids, that energy runs out. You can't mask anymore. You can't hide it anymore. You can't compensate, especially since I've got 2 very hectic boys, like by anyone's standards. So how do you feel that karate has helped your ADHD, and how it informs your teaching as an instructor?
I think it's probably like, obviously I don't have a diagnosis, but it goes, I'm absolutely on the spectrum. I think that personality, that way our mind works, I think that is what draws us to karate. It's repetition, but at the same time, it's always different. If that would
Yes.
only make sense to a karateka. We know where we're going, we know what we're wearing, we know the format, but when we go, there's so much new stuff that it keeps us inspired and keeps us going back. It's a borderline insanity, really, when you look at how long we train for, how long we devote
Yeah.
our time to this. We couldn't do that if if our brains weren't wired a certain way. So I think the one secret to karate is commitment. You don't have to be an athlete. You don't have to be brilliantly intelligent, but if you commit to it, you will achieve. And I think that's one thing that people with ADHD and autism and on the spectrum, they like to commit to something. And especially if they find it stimulating and rewarding, they will commit for a long time.
I was unmedicated and undiagnosed for most of my life. But the thing is, having always been in a dojo of some kind. When I was 11, I started with judo. Then I changed schools. There was no more judo, which made me sad. I ended up waiting until I got to varsity. Did multiple styles there because it's university. You have so much spare time. I did. And then having stuck that out, and then realizing how rarefied the field is of people who stick things out for more than 5 years, 10 years. Now I'm heading into my 20th year of doing karate. I only took time off to give birth. That's it. I haven't had a break. And I don't want to break. Like, I can't imagine not being in the dojo. I hated being pregnant because I was like, I couldn't do kata, I couldn't do this, I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
For me, it's such a beautiful thing. And like you say, it balances the two demands of the ADHD mind. We need routine because we suck at making it for ourselves, but we also need novelty. Yes, like you say, the routine. I know what I have to wear. Okay, I don't have to think about this thing. Like every morning for me, it's karate shirt and shorts or jeans because I don't really want to think about it more than that. People are like, don't you wear anything else? I'm like, no, because I have X bandwidth. Please leave me and my little bandwidth alone. You know why Obama and Steve Jobs wore the same thing every day? It's one less thing to think about. So my karate suit, cool.
Yeah.
I just decide on the day, do I wear a lightweight or a heavyweight suit because of the weather? That's as much decision making goes into that outfit. Yeah. So I think, and that's why we have, I mean, if I look at our dojo intake form, which asks, is there anything you'd like us to know about? And it includes, do you want us to know about neurodivergency and all of that? Like 70% of the dojo is ADHD. And it's awesome because that creativity that we get as part of the trade-off, you know, for like not having falters or being forgetful and having low muscle tone and all of those things, the immense creativity and this kind of what I call the energy overdraft. Like when things are on the line, we can draw from a bottomless well of energy. People always say to Shane, I don't know how you do it. How do you run a dojo and a YouTube channel and kids and the chimney sweeping business and, you know, all the other multitude of projects? We just have this abundance of energy. That's the trade-off. I don't really like calling it a superpower because if you're not managing it, it doesn't feel like it. It can cause so much misery, especially for kids who are undiagnosed and are not getting any help or support. But once you know how to work with it, and I'm learning every day, I still have to do a lot of things that I'm working with the brain I have, not the one I want. If you look at my desk, everything is written down. There's to-do lists everywhere. There's paperwork everywhere. There's calendars for everything. Because if it's not written down, it's not going to happen. And I think one of the best ways to explain ADHD, there's two modes. Can't stop, can't start. So if you don't have enough dopamine, nothing's happening and the can't start. That's why doom scrolling and that is actually one of the worst things. Social media is one of the worst inventions for ADHD brains, especially in kids. So I think it's such a privilege to do what we do. And we found a niche where we could teach karate with our ADHD brains. I mean, you couldn't do that decades ago. You had to have many instructors have to have a 9-to-5 job. Shay and I are very fortunate that we can do this full time all year round. But I hated corporate so much. I used to be in advertising, which was great for the writing part, but the rest of it sucked. Like I used to be a copywriter. I still am a copywriter. I mean, I write my own blog posts. I'll die before I use AI for that. But for me, it would be a crime to use AI. Writing is my one true gift. And Shay's always like, yeah, you don't understand how good your writing is. I'm like, you don't understand how good your karate is. Shut up. Like, he's a born karate genius and he doesn't see it. And I know he doesn't really watch all my videos, so it's fine. He won't hear that. And we talked about ADHD and bullying. And the last thing I want to finish on is what advice do you have for anyone who's starting this journey or wants to stay in this journey? If you could have put anything on a billboard for every karate person to read or a pamphlet, what would you share with everyone who's watching about karate?
Yeah. I'd probably just go with our dojo-kun. I know a lot of dojos have very elaborate dojo-kun that's, instill very, very good traits. I'm from Australia. People like to poke fun at us being a bit backward, and we like to keep it very, very simple. Now, dojo-kun, my wife actually invented or created many years ago. It's three things: commitment, attitude, and effort. If you want to be good at karate,
covers everything.
You commit to it. You have to have the right attitude. Be gentle to yourself when you have a night off. Encourage yourself back into the dojo. Deal with people respectfully. Don't remember that you're in charge of your own behavior. It's about attitude. And then effort. If you want to get better, you have to put some effort in. If you've got a sore body, you've got to, massage that effort, so to speak, to work around injuries and it's about being clever with your effort. It's back to pressure testing. Don't be ridiculous with your pressure testing. We've got to be smart about it. So three things are commitment, attitude, and effort. That's what people need if they want to start and if they want to remain successful for karate through their whole life.
Those are great life lessons as well, Sensei. And it's often we tell the kids, consistency is the only currency that matters. I think Stephen King said, talent is as cheap as table salt. Show me what you can do. In fact, it's not the talented kids that stick it out. It's plodders like me. I'm a great plodder. I was never born with any real physical talent. I was that kid who got picked stone cold last for sport. I couldn't run straight. I couldn't swim well. You know, like you said, way back in our now hour-long conversation, how the time's flown. It feels like 15 minutes. You were talking about how, you know, the dojo is a place of belonging where it doesn't really matter your physical ability. In any mainstream sports code, if you're not good, there's nowhere for you to belong. You can't be
Yes.
half good at running. You're a liability. I think a lot of my resentment with school sport was the fact that if you weren't good, well, there's no place for you here. Go back to the library, nerd. So when I found judo as a kid, the uncoordinated kid found somewhere to belong. And it's fine. It's okay to suck. In fact, you are expected to suck at karate or judo, whatever, when you start. But you don't have that luxury in anything else. Martial arts is the one world where you can be exactly who you are physically and then get better. You have to put in the work. Sensei can only open the doors.
Yes.
I can't push you through it.
Yeah.
What a
Absolutely
privilege
spot
it has
on.
been to speak
I
to you.
think absolutely. This is why we're friends. We're on the same page. So
Yeah.
thank you so much, Sensei,
Absolutely.
for the opportunity to have a chat. Hopefully someone finds our chat interesting.
I'm sure they will. I mean, despite YouTube's shadow banning of long form channels, I don't care. I'm still going to make my little videos, even if like 20 people watch them. If you look at Sensei Tuari and Sensei Les Bubka, the sheer output of work they've done in the time they've been on YouTube is a staggering body of work. And they've just done it regardless of the fact that, sure, I may have the bigger channel, but their impact is phenomenal. I mean, they're influencing people in different countries across the world. And that's all. Isn't that what we're here for? I think Muhammad Ali said, how you treat others is your rent you pay to be on this earth. And I think that's so important. That's the rent we're paying, is by making a difference in other people's lives and sharing this beautiful karate and life journey with people all over the world.
Amazing, Sensei. Thank you so much. I just
Thank you
want
so much for your time.
So liberal with all of your quotes. So I'll just leave you with this one. For everyone listening, wherever you go in life, there you are.
Beautiful. What a place to end. Thank you so much, Sensei. Thank you for your time all the way from Johannesburg, South Africa. And we'll chat in the green room after this.
No worries.